What if I told you some of the richest pastors didn't get wealthy from business, but from the blind faith of their followers? From selling VIP tickets to giving people false hopes. Here are 12 black pastors who became millionaires off faith. You absolutely wouldn't believe what number 3 asked his church to buy him. 12th pastor Mark Burns.
Of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Pastor Mark Burns had the kind of energy that could light up a room and apparently also change his own resume. He started a small church in South Carolina called Harvest Praise and Worship Center, but most people know him for backing Donald Trump. He called himself a bold voice of God for conservatives, but the more attention he got, the more people started looking into his story. In 2016, CNN found out he lied about a lot. He said he had a degree from North Greenville University. It turns out he didn't. He also said he served 6 years in the Army Reserve, but he hadn't. He even claimed to be in a fraternity that had no record of him. When asked about it, he blamed a web error. But the truth was, he made it all up. The problem wasn't just the lies. People at his church said he asked for big donations, promising blessings and breakthroughs. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 99% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Then the money disappeared, spent on travel, TV appearances, and his political career. He also started the Now Television Network, calling it the next big thing in Christian media. Donations came in fast, but no one really knew where the money went. People started asking why the pastor asking for seed offerings was suddenly living like a TV executive. Burns told everyone God was raising him up, but it looked more like he was lifting himself with other people's money. But Mark Burns isn't the only American preacher profiting from the pulpit. Keep watching, because this next name takes faith-based hustle to a whole new level. 11th, Bishop Noel Jones.
Not just have some prophetic word with some declaration about something that's going to happen.
Bishop Noel Jones has already had a great talent for packaging the gospel like a premium product. At City of Refuge in LA, salvation came with a soundtrack, a camera crew, and a donation link. Jones knew how to work a crowd, but he was even better at working a market. His sermons were in a way that you couldn't quite tell if it was a prophecy or a stage performance, and people couldn't help but pay for the experience. From conference tickets to love offerings and VIP prayer events, there was always a new way to give. And while Jones never discouraged that type of generosity, it was clear that if you wanted access to hear him speak, you'd better open your wallet. He made sure a front row seat at his next speaking engagement cost a fortune, and he also had a fee for every private counseling or special anointing a member needed. Between the church, the TV broadcasts, the global speaking circuit, and appearances on Preachers of LA, Jones quietly turned the pulpit into a personal brand empire. While other pastors bragged openly about jets and mansions, Jones played it cooler. But don't let the restraint fool you. The money flowed. Jones often preached to people desperate for healing, breakthrough, or financial relief, then followed it up with calls to sow a sacrificial seed, which actually translates to give more, and maybe God will bless you next. What he gave was hope, but this hope came along with a price tag. And while he stayed just inside the lines of the traditional prosperity gospel, the results were the same. He got rich, the church got bigger, and the poor stayed praying. But if you think Bishop Noel Jones is bold, you won't believe that the next pastor on this list once made his members believe that being poor is a curse. 10. Reverend Ike.
Who come to the meetings here in Los Angeles when I'm here to teach.
Before Instagram preachers made prosperity look glamorous, there was Reverend Ike, arguably the first to turn the pulpit into a personal brand. Born Frederick J. Ikerenkoetter II, he ran his empire out of New York in the 1970s, and one of the messages he spread was that poverty wasn't holy, and God wanted you rich, but maybe just not as rich as him. Reverend Ike preached that wealth was the true sign of faith. His sermons were broadcast to millions, turning his church into more of a showbiz studio than a sanctuary. He had a mansion, a fleet of Rolls Royces, and a private jet funded by the same congregation he told to visualize abundance. He didn't rely on healing or theatrics. He just told people that if they wanted prosperity, all they had to do was sow a seed, and they did. His church became a fundraising machine. Prayer cloths, blessing kits, donation letters. Everything came with a price and a promise. To his followers, giving was investing. To him, it was income. Reverend Ike wasn't shy about his success either. While others hid behind holy modesty, he flexed. He even once said he didn't want pie in the sky when he died, and all he wanted was cash in the stash while he was still alive. If you think turning a church into showbiz was the lowest pastors could go, wait till you meet the next pastor on our list. He didn't just claim to heal the sick, he tried to outshine Jesus himself. 9. Pastor Alf Lukow.
Because God needs to rectify something in your life.
Meet Pastor Alf Lukow, aka the man who allegedly raised the dead on camera with a coffin and a crowd. Sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? Well, this man is the general overseer of Alleluia Ministries International, a megachurch in South Africa led by the self-proclaimed prophet and faith healer himself. Lukow rose to fame for a stunt that broke the internet and had skeptics, believers, and even local funeral homes trying to find out if he was indeed the second coming of Christ. In 2019, a video of Lukow commanding a dead man to rise from his coffin went viral. The man gasped, stood up, and walked away without asking any questions. Except a lot of people had questions. It turns out the miracle was staged. Funeral companies involved later denied knowing it was fake, and the backlash was huge. But the sad truth is that by the time the truth came out, the views were in, the donations were up, and Alpha's global clout had already multiplied. I guess that's the thing about spectacle. It sells. Pastor Alf drives high-end cars, owns a mansion in Johannesburg, and runs his church like a well-oiled business. With a loyal international following and flashy televised sermons, he's turned divine theatrics into a multi-million-dollar empire. Of course, none of this has stopped his members from donating to his church every Sunday, and some still have faith that it was the pastor's healing power that brought the already alive man back to life. Well, when mixed with desperation and a promise of healing, it is powerful, sometimes too powerful. Just when you thought Pastor Alf Lukow's resurrection stunt was the peak of pulpit madness, this next pastor convinced his congregation to eat grass. You heard me right, grass. 8. Pastor Lesego Daniel.
Choose life. If you choose life, there will be life.
If you've ever felt like your pastor was feeding you nonsense, well, just be thankful he wasn't feeding you actual grass. Unless, of course, you attended Rabboni Center Ministries in South Africa, home to Pastor Lesego Daniel. Back in 2014, Daniel went viral for convincing dozens of his followers to crawl around on all fours and literally eat grass off the church grounds. He claimed it helped them get closer to God. What really got them was a trip to the hospital. Photos surfaced of women and men chewing grass like goats in broad daylight, some of them vomiting afterward and others passing out from exhaustion. But instead of outrage, his followers defended him. Some even claimed they felt spiritually cleansed because apparently a miracle can taste like lawn clippings. This wasn't even his only bizarre sermon. Later, he sprayed doom insecticide into the faces of churchgoers, claiming it had healing powers. Yes, bug spray on the face. And somehow his church continued to grow. Could it be faith, fear, mind control? Who knows, it might actually be a little of all three. Despite public outcry and government investigations, Pastor Lesego faced few lasting consequences. In fact, his popularity surged. Donations kept rolling in, church attendance stayed high, and the media circus only made him more infamous. Meanwhile, he continued to enjoy the luxuries of a well-funded ministry. Pastor Lesego Daniel is a prime example of what happens when blind faith meets unchecked power. And if you thought grass eating was outrageous, the next man on our list claims he visited heaven, took selfies, and came back with merch. 7. Prophet Paseka Mboro Motsoeneng.
I've been provoked, and it's known that I have armed security forces.
Prophet Mboro shot to fame in South Africa as the unstoppable leader of Incredible Happenings Ministries. He's famous for claiming he's the only person who visited heaven and even said he had a personal snapshot to prove it. He's also known for cruising around in a flashy Bentley and releasing one-song albums about walking with God. But Mboro's headline-making moment came when he accused the police of spiritual interference after they raided his church office. Later, it was revealed that Mboro might have doctored his own documents. Through it all, Mboro's followers kept pouring in. They believed wholeheartedly because who wouldn't want proof that their pastor has a first-class ticket to the afterlife? Yet, even as critics called him a fraud, Mboro doubled down on miracles. Well, you know what would be a miracle for me? If you liked this video and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories like this. Trust me, you don't have to give a dime like Mboro's members. Just hit that subscribe button. Now back to Mboro. Despite legal battles and constant controversies, he's kept his congregation loyal, once remarking that if God actually wanted him to speak in court, then God would have given him a law degree instead. Now, if you think that's the most absurd thing a pastor could convince his congregation to believe, think again, because this next one would shock you. 6th Pastor Lethebo Rabalago. Pastor Lethebo Rabalago, the self-proclaimed man of God from Mount Zion General Assembly, South Africa, gained international attention not for his sermons, but for what he sprayed in them. During a 2016 church service, Pastor Rabalago did something so outrageous that it stunned the internet. He sprayed his congregation with Doom insecticide, claiming it had holy healing powers. Little wonder what would make anyone believe that an insect spray would actually contain healing powers. Is the same bug killer meant for cockroaches and mosquitoes? But you'd be surprised to know that people wholeheartedly bought into this, and even give a donation just to get a taste of this holy insecticide. He sprayed it into people's faces, onto their bodies, even into open wounds, insisting it would cure everything from HIV to cancer to demons. One woman reportedly died after the anointed spray was used on her, but even that didn't stop him. In interviews, he defended his actions, saying God could use anything to perform miracles, even doom. Rabalago believed he was operating by faith and claimed his followers were healed because of it. South African health authorities obviously disagreed, warning the public against such reckless acts and calling them dangerous, but the damage was already done and the headlines had already traveled. It'll also surprise you that his members increased greatly and even more donations poured in after this scandal, because the members who claimed they were actually healed believe the pastor was indeed instructed by God to do such. What's scary here isn't just the insecticide, it's the blind faith that allowed it to happen in the first place. And Pastor Rabalago knew exactly how to stir that faith into something unquestioning, no matter how bizarre or harmful it became. This next pastor does something even more ridiculous, and you'll be shocked how people still buy into it. 5. Pastor Paul Sanyangore. While most pastors preach about connecting with God through prayer, Pastor Paul Sanyangore claimed he had God's phone number saved in his contacts. He leads Victory World International Ministries in Zimbabwe, where he built his reputation on dramatic displays of divine access. During services, he'd pull out his phone and pretend to call heaven. And for the right donation, he claimed he could help you get a word in too. But that wasn't even the most outrageous part. Sanyangore also sold what he called heavenly life certificates, laminated papers that supposedly guaranteed your place in heaven. They looked like diplomas, but instead of degrees, they offered eternal salvation. Of course, they came at a price. Depending on how much you give, you could secure one for yourself or pay extra to cover a loved one. Baptisms had payment tiers. Faster prayers cost more. Salvation became something you could basically finance. He once went viral for shouting, "Hello, is this heaven?" into his phone while casting out demons living in a church. People cheered, cried, and reached for their wallets. Critics called him a scammer. Some questioned his mental state, but Sanyangore brushed off all criticism, saying doubters were enemies of faith, and mocking him was mocking God. The certificate stunt eventually faded from headlines, but the tactics didn't. His ministry kept rebranding, finding new ways to turn devotion into dollars, and despite the backlash, many of his followers stayed loyal, convinced he was more than just a man with a microphone and a cell phone. Hold one cause. These final 5 pastors would leave disgusted by how far these men can go to extort money from hopeful congregations. 4. Bishop Gilbert Deya.
In 3 to 5 days, why is it taking me 40 years?
Bishop Gilbert Deya, a UK-based Kenya-born preacher and founder of Gilbert Deya Ministries in Liverpool, became infamous for offering desperate women something no hospital could: miracle babies. He claimed women in his church could give birth without ever getting pregnant. No in vitro fertilization or adoption. All you needed were prayer, faith, and of course a generous donation. The promise was clear: sow a seed, and God God would bless your womb. For years, his church functioned like a spiritual fertility clinic. Dea preached that the barren would conceive supernaturally, and hopeful women lined up to receive their blessing. But behind the scenes, something far more sinister was unfolding. Investigators later discovered the so-called miracle babies weren't miracles at all. They were stolen from hospitals and orphanages in Kenya and handed to unsuspecting followers. The scheme fell apart when DNA tests in the UK revealed a supposed mother had no biological connection to the child she'd been given. That discovery sparked a full investigation, and in 2017, Dea was extradited to Kenya to face child trafficking charges. But even with the scandal in full view, he kept preaching. He claimed innocence, his followers defended him, and the donations kept rolling in. Some insisted he was being persecuted for his faith. Others saw a man who turned spiritual desperation into a full-blown black market for babies. Dea was eventually acquitted due to lack of evidence, but not before milking years of loyalty, money, and belief from people who just wanted to become parents. And just when you think this faith hustle can't go lower, wait till you meet the next pastor, whose church services are like blockbuster movies and whose congregation pays handsomely for the ticket. Third prophet Elvis Mbonye. Elvis Mbonye is founder of Zoe Fellowship Ministries and a self-declared modern-day prophet with designer suits, bodyguards, and an air of divine entitlement. The strange part is that his followers are all so convinced of his heavenly connections that some have literally kissed his shoes in public. In one infamous service, loyal church members knelt before him and kissed his Gucci loafers as he had just come back from a trip to heaven, and they wanted to have a taste of his holy shoes. But aside from the foot-kissing ceremonies, the man is also a master of spiritual marketing. He claims to have predicted the 9/11 attacks, Donald Trump's presidency, and other global events. Conveniently, most of those prophecies were announced after the fact or were carefully worded so they could mean almost anything. Still, his followers treat every vague prediction like it came down on a tablet of stone, and don't think you can just stroll into his service and sit wherever you want. Mbonye's church offers tiered seating, and yes, VIP access comes at a price. It's called the honor fee. And if you want to get close to the prophet, you'd better be ready to show your financial gratitude. After all, proximity to God's anointed one doesn't come cheap. While most pastors say offerings are for church work, Mbonye's lifestyle says something different. He has numerous designer clothes, luxury cars, bodyguards, and invitation-only events. It only gets worse from this point on, because you won't believe what this pastor asks his members to get him. Second Creflo Dollar. Well, when your last name is Dollar, it's only fitting that your ministry revolves around money, and Pastor Creflo Dollar has leaned all the way into that destiny. Creflo Dollar is the founder of World Changers Church International, one of the biggest megachurches in the United States, with tens of thousands of members and a message centered squarely on prosperity. Creflo preaches that God doesn't want you broke. In fact, he teaches that wealth is a sign of divine favor, which is interesting because his sermons seem to benefit his own bank account more than anyone else's. With reported net worth in the tens of millions, multiple mansions, luxury cars, and a private jet, Dollar is literally living in dollars. But his most infamous moment came in 2015 when he launched a fundraising campaign to raise $65 million for a brand new Gulfstream G650 jet so he could spread the gospel in style. And while the internet dragged him through the mud, his church stood by him. They claimed it wasn't about luxury. It was about doing the Lord's work efficiently. Apparently, flying commercials are a threat to salvation. Creflo eventually canceled the campaign, but the stunt cemented his reputation as the poster boy for prosperity preaching. This actually raises a bigger question when you start wondering what exactly Point Faith turns into fundraising. But even while critics called it a shameless cash grab, many of his loyal followers didn't blink. They still packed his pews, mailed in tithes, and doubled down on the belief that giving to Dollar would somehow make them rich, too. And yet, in this world of private jets and praise music, Creflo Dollar still doesn't top the list, cause the final person on this list fooled his church so badly he had to stow away to another country. 1. Prophet Shepherd Bushiri. Prophet Shepherd Bushiri built the Enlightened Christian Gathering into one of the most influential churches on the continent. With stadium-sized services and claims of miracle money, healing, and even walking on air, he became a religious celebrity with a global reach. His followers called him Major One, a title he embraced with his whole heart. He's always seen draped in designer suits and guarded by tight security. But behind the polished image was a growing mountain of accusations of fraud, money laundering, and exploiting faith for financial gain. While he preached prosperity from the pulpit, critics say the real wealth flowed in one direction, straight to Bushiri's account. Bushiri once claimed to walk on air, and he even posted a blurry video of it. But that wasn't all. He said he could summon angels and speak to God directly. And the worst of them all was when a testimony that he could miraculously deliver money from heaven into people's bank accounts came out. But of course, his followers had to sow, or should I say, invest a faith seed first before they received the surprise money in their account, like a spiritual Ponzi scheme with Bible verses taped on. But it wasn't just his miracle claims that raised eyebrows. Bushiri raked in millions through prophetic consultations, exclusive prayer lines, and church conferences with ticket prices that looked more Coachella than communion. He lived in mansions, drove Bentleys, and flew private while asking his mostly struggling congregation to give sacrificially so they could break financial curses. Then came the real storm. In 2020, Bushiri and his wife were arrested in South Africa on charges of fraud, money laundering, and theft involving over $7 million. They posted bail and promised to cooperate before he suddenly vanished, like one of his miracles. He was later found to have moved back to Malawi, and when asked why he ran, he claimed he didn't trust the justice system and that God told him to leave. Despite the legal drama, Bushiri still runs his ministry, still preaching, still prophesying, still collecting offerings from believers who'd rather ignore the receipts than face the reality. We've just seen how some of these pastors built empires from tithes, offerings, and promises of prosperity. But there's a darker side we didn't touch. This contains true stories of manipulation, staged miracles, and betrayals of trust that most people have never heard. So check out our next video on the most deceptive black pastors in the world. We'll expose how they fooled their congregations and share the red flags you need to watch for. You'll be shocked at what you'll discover.